Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our ongoing live coverage of CMA Industry Week here on day 7 already, believe it or not. And for the rest of the day, we are focused in and putting a spotlight on Automobility and their family of brands that they distribute. We did part 1 of a 2-part electromedia training with legendary trainer Ken Ward. And yes, I forced his hand to come back one more time because there is another big brand that Automobility offers, and that is, of course, Audison. So let's go ahead and bring Ken back. Mr. Ward,
Hey
you're back.
Ben, how you doing?
Did you get a chance to refresh, reset, and get ready? Oh, you even changed shirts. Look at you.
Oh,
You're all ready to go.
for
Audison
you
status.
guys, we want to come up to your high production standard. So we're here for you.
I do appreciate that, sir. I do appreciate it. I'm sure our dealers appreciate that. So I know we have a cool video that we can set the mood with, but I wanted just to start by, I always try to address those dealers that may be watching this and maybe learning about Audison brand for the very first time. We can't be ignorant thinking everybody knows everything. This is the reason why we do these things, is to educate.
Right.
Set us up. We talked a little bit about Hertz, right? Where does Audison sit in the landscape of all things audio?
Well, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a couple of minutes, but Audison really started off making amplifiers that were better than what was out there. And amplifiers, and this is going to make me sound old, but nowadays a lot of people just take it for granted that an amplifier is going to play from 20 to 20K. And they just take it for granted that it's not going to have a lot of background noise. But in the beginning, that was not something you could take for granted. You just couldn't. And so Audison started out in amplifiers. And if you go talk to an MBA about how to be in the audio business, and they talk about acquiring different companies and then leveraging the badges and things like this. And one of the things that they never talk about is how good it sounds. And Audison is still managed by the 3 people and owned by the 3 people that founded it and run it today. And so the goals may be different in that we have different cars and we can make different things, but the essential love of music and fulfilling the potential of music is the same as it was when the company started. And I think that is nice to know about somebody you're in business with, that they have your success at installing music systems at heart.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but for me, Audison has always been a premium line. And I'm not saying that they don't have products that do cater to a little bit more modest budget, but they certainly also have products that cater to the higher end of the budget spectrum. I'm very excited to be here of all of that. It's got European flair, no, of course, with their Italian roots. But one thing that comes across every time I see or hear anything about Audison is ingenuity when it comes to amplification and DSP. I do hear that a lot.
Yes, I think that they've earned that reputation, and I know there's more things in the hopper that I'm sure I'll be back and talking with you about in the near future. But dealers are definitely having success with DSP amplification. I think that DSP amplification is going to take over the bulk of DSP, if it hasn't already, in the very near future.
All right.
So one other thing I wanted to circle back to is that you mentioned that Audison is known as a high-end company, as being able to, like the thesis speakers that we'll talk about in a few minutes, are the pinnacle of over 30 years of experience. Some dealers don't know that Audison also has products that can be used in more day-to-day business to still make you sound good and still make you look good and still make your customer happy. The line is broader than you might have expected if you weren't exposed to the entire thing, which is something we'll talk about today.
I was hoping that you'd do that. But what say we set the mood with a video?
Let's do that.
From the roots of our excellence we started a journey into the future. To create the most extraordinary experience in your car. A new era of sound.
So obviously that video kind of plants a flag. That video isn't about mid-fi. They're letting you know how seriously they take the task at hand, and that they want to deliver excellence. And we will talk about that theme over and over today. I think that is a video is actually a perfect way to introduce some things I'm sure I'll be back to talk to you about later on this year.
All right.
So with that, if we could put, do you think those visuals, there they go. Okay. So let's see here. We talked about Audison. There's the headquarters building in Italy with the core founders of the business back in 1979 in the upper right, and today in the lower left. And I've had the chance to visit this building. The building is a technological marvel. You can see the pictures of the solar panels on the top. It's actually a very, very high efficiency building from beginning to end. It really sets the tone for what kind of work you're going to do there when the building is smarter than most buildings I've been in. So the four things I want to talk about today is the breadth of the product line, the engineering experience that they have, the fact that they do have vertical integration with their DSP and amplification, and also their speakers. And the passion for sound and design was obvious in the video that we watched. And here is a picture of the facility that the speakers are built in, that is 100% owned by Electromedia, Audison's parent company. And once again, I think that's something that is a benefit other companies wish they could have. That's a lot of awards. That's just EISA awards, and I think one Innovations award. There's more. This slide was created like 2 years ago, so I think there's probably more than this. But they really are, and in Europe, even more so than in North America, they're accepted as a audiophile reference. So amplifiers is the core business. Thesis is the ultimate. Voce is high fidelity class AB. We'll talk about that very briefly. The AV 5.1 is a Voce amp that is their flagship hybrid amp, and we'll talk about that. SR is a new line. It's a classic name in the Audison history books, but now it's in Class D, and we're going to talk about that. That's probably the biggest opportunity for dealers who haven't tried this line out before. And Prima is the OEM integrator. There's a new model in that line, which opens up some possibilities that we will also talk about. So here's a map that I made to help figure out where all the different lines fall. So with speakers, you have Thesis, Voce, Prima, and Prima. Why do I have Prima in there twice? Great question, Ben. I'm going to show you that in a minute. And then we've got Prima subwoofers, which looks like one dot, but that's a massive category that many dealers are finding great success in right now. Then with amplifiers, we have Prima, Prima Forza, SR, kind of sitting on top of each other a little bit. One has DSP, one does not. And then Voce and Thesis amplifiers. And then bit products from the bit 10 at the entry level all the way up to the bit virtuoso. So that's a lot of product. So there's going to be some technology terms that if you're an Audison dealer or if you're just learning about Audison, you're going to hear these terms over and over. So I want to make sure to cover these. One of them is USS, Universal Speaker Simulator. As you know, I run an online community of technicians sharing integration information about vehicles. One of the most common questions we get is, what size resistor does this car need? What external widget does this car need to not mute? And Audison has built into a number of their products USS technology where you don't have to think about that. You just hook up the amplifier and it works. That's built into the APF 8.9 bit, the Forza multi-channel DSP amp, all the SR amplifiers, the Bit Nove processor, the Virtuoso processor, and I believe it is now built into the Bit 10 as well. It is also available as an external widget, so you can have a USS 4 that works for everything, even if it's not Audison branded. Another name you'll hear is ART, Auto Remote Turn On, which basically is DC offset sensing. That is the most reliable form of sensing to turn on an amplifier. But not all cars have DC offset. So if they don't have DC offset, some products have AST. And AST is a signal detect that doesn't require DC offset. It's not quite as dependable as DC offset, but if you need it, it's there in certain products. There's also one that was kind of weird for me, 2S2, and this will come more obvious when I show you pictures of the subwoofer enclosures. Some more technology terms, DEQ, that is EQing the OEM signal back to flat automatically. If it's a full range signal, it's EQing it. If it is a partial range signal, it's summing it and then DEQing it. It's a feature of all the Audison DSP processors and amps. This is important if you've been working with a company that either doesn't really have any kind of integration front end or has a manual integration front end, because DEQ is something that is done automatically when you play a test tone and push a button. Or if you're dealing with product that doesn't have any DEQ at all and you have to do it on the output side. This can save you a ton of time in getting good sound. The Virtuoso processor also has D-time and D-phase. There's ways to correct phase errors and phase shifts in the factory system. Sometimes those happen because of factory equalization, and sometimes it's actually on purpose because they're trying to make the system sound less horrible. They're solving some phase problems themselves. Full DA and full DA HD, those are the fully digital signal path to the amplifiers. If you have any customers come in with older gear that's full DA, it might not be full DA HD, which means it might not support the higher sampling rates that HD requires. Audison has shifted to supporting the higher, the high definition audio all the way through full DA. And FIR, and we won't have time to dive into this too much today, but FIR stands for finite impulse response, which means you have phase-controlled DSP filters. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about Virtuoso, which is the only car audio processor from any of the major brands that uses FIR at the moment today. So, areas of focus. We'll talk about subs. I hear those are important. We'll talk about DSP amplifiers, and we'll talk about the new Class D amplifier family. And we'll talk about some advanced speakers. The reasons I'm going to focus on these today is because I think these are the biggest opportunities, even for existing dealers, to find new solutions that maybe in the past year with all the chaos, they didn't have a chance to try out. So that said, I'm going to mention Thesis for a moment. That's a picture of a Thesis tweeter, which is like 1.5 inches. It's not small, but it's amazing. That's been in the line for a while. What's new is this Thesis 3-inch Voce mid-range driver. Here's a confusing thing. Possibly, I want to warn you, this is not in the Voce line. It's in the Thesis line, but the name of the mid-range is Voce, which is Italian for voice. So don't be fooled. Once again, I love the picture of this speaker because it's 70 millimeters across, but it looks like a massive subwoofer in the photograph. Now, when we go to Voce, the authentic voice, this is Class AB amplification, which is Audison's hallmark. It's what people know Audison for the most is Class AB amplification. And I'm going to review the line really quickly. There are Uno, Duo, and Quattro Class AB amplifiers. You can probably guess that's a mono amp, a 2-channel amp, and a 4-channel amp. And they're all Class AB. And they all have an internal computer-controlled fan system to keep them cool, even though they don't have a huge bunch of fins sticking off the top of the heatsink. That means you can install them upside down, that sort of thing. Now, you can fit them or order them with a full DA HD front end. So if you're doing a full DA system, and for those of you that haven't done that, it means you can take a digital signal into your bit processor, and with a compatible bit processor, you can come out in a digital form using RJ45 cables, and the conversion to analog doesn't happen until you get into the amplifier. It's a fully digital system. Audison's the only one that has it, and it's a pretty cool way to do high-end audio.
So the DAC is built into the amp?
There are DACs built into the amp that can handle 24-bit high-res files. So the AV 5.1K 5-channel amp is very special, and it's been out a few years, and some people haven't used it because they're new to the brand, but this is something you really need to know about. It has two 75-watt Class A channels, and those are for tweeters or for mid-ranges and tweeters. Then it has two 140-watt Class AB channels, and those are for mid-bass, speakers in the door, usually. And then it's got one 600-watt Class D sub-channel. So without going into a whole class on amplifiers, Class A is best for tweeters, Class AB is the best for mid-range and mid-bass, and Class D is the best for subs. And you get all that in one 5-channel amp, which can be configured fully digital.
I have not encountered this scenario yet. This is new.
This is a really cool amplifier that it's not small because, as you know, Class AB amplifiers will generate some heat. But you can set this one amp up in your system and run a flagship reference quality system with one amplifier. I know you're thinking which card it's going to go in right now, Ben. I know what you're thinking.
I'm just saying that I have not seen individual type amplification in a multi-channel amplifier specific to this type of design and layout. With the
I believe that the 5.1K was the first hybrid amplifier of this type.
Especially with the full digital in.
Yes. Now, and it sounds great analog too, don't get me wrong, but you can get it with the digital input card already installed, or you can install it as an upgrade in the field. So that's the flagship amplifier in the Voce line is the 5.1K. So they do have speakers in the Voce line. I'm just mention them really quickly. A 1 1/8 inch tweeter, a 3-inch mid-range, 6.5 inch mid-bass. You can get a component set, and you can get a coaxial. So, subwoofers. When I talk about a complete solution, Audison hasn't necessarily been known as a subwoofer company. They've been known as an amplifier company, and they've been known as a DSP company, for sure. And they've been known as a company that does great cabin speakers. Some people don't think of them when it comes to subwoofers, and they decided they wanted to correct this. They really wanted to offer dealers some solutions that would help their business. So there's 3 different types of subwoofers in the Prima subwoofer line. There are component drivers, which is what I would tend to think of for subwoofers because I'm the old school guy that builds an enclosure every time he does a subwoofer, right? There are passive loaded enclosures. This is a big category for upgrades. Putting a subwoofer in the vehicle that's already built and doesn't need to be assembled. And then an active loaded enclosure that has the amplifier in the subwoofer for the add a sub category, which is a growing category where somebody comes in and says, you know, this OEM system isn't as bad as the previous OEM systems I've had, but it still doesn't have any bass. Can I just add a subwoofer? And this product has performed really well in those applications. So the powered subwoofers I'm going to mention first. They have something they call high efficiency, low impedance. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, so I'm going to skip that part. It doesn't have a traditional switching power supply. It's the boosted DC technology, and that means it gets to 90% efficient. You don't need as big a power wire. You don't need as much cooling. They don't work to make them work. They use a specific woofer that is incredibly low impedance. I think on one of them, it's 0.16 ohms. And so you wouldn't want to swap that in the field with a regular woofer. It wouldn't work. But the combination of the really low impedance woofer and the boosted rail technology means that you get 400 watts in the box. and you don't need to run a massive power wire to do it. They also added some technology called dynamic bass tracking. And dynamic bass tracking to me sounds a lot like a leading signal tracking system. It looks at the bass signal. It decides when the bass peaks are coming and handles those bass peaks a couple of different ways to keep hard clipping out of the signal. So fundamentally, sounds like a bigger amplifier. Sounds like you have more bass, maybe than the system is even producing, because it's dynamic. It changes with the music, which is a lot better than clipping. When nobody likes clipping. It has a few different features for turn on. We were talking about the difference between ART and AST. Both of those are built in, and it's got a turn on wire. It's also got a 4-pin high level plug, so you can make it easily removable if you're putting it in a situation where it needs to be removable at times. It's got a 4-pin plug and a 3-pin power ground remote plug. So it's a well thought out package. Now I'm going to go through the individual drivers for a minute, the sizes. This is an 8-inch shallow subwoofer, 200 millimeters, 250 watts continuous power. This is a single 4-ohm voice coil, and it's made for vented enclosures. Pretty small vented enclosures, but vented enclosures. So that's an 8-inch woofer. You can get it in a vented enclosure pre-made. So that's useful. Now here is the dual voice coil 8-inch, which is designed for sealed enclosures. It's got dual 4-ohm voice coils. So it's a 2-ohm load in most applications. And it's made for sealed. And 0.3 of a cubic foot is a very small sealed enclosure.
0.3.
Yes.
That's
right?
tiny.
I remember when we needed 1.25 feet and we had to call ahead. That woofer is available in a sealed enclosure as well. And you see how you can put it in facing up or facing down? It comes with feet that you can attach to the pre-existing holes that have Velcro on them. So you can put them in the trunk and it doesn't slide around when you drive the way you and I drive, Ben. It's amazing.
Yeah. I can also put my groceries on top of it, and
that's comes with the grill too.
And Ange won't mind.
So here's the powered version. And the powered version is also sealed. It comes with the knob, and it is not very large. As you can see, it's like 14.5 inches by 11.5 inches by 5.3 inches high. And it is 250 watts continuous out of the amplifier in this powered subwoofer. Now, we go up to the 10-inch model. There is a 10-inch. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention about the sealed enclosure is that it brings out both voice coils. So if you're powering it where you need to have both voice coils available, all 4 terminals are available on the sealed enclosure, which is very useful. I've used that myself. Now, for the 10-inch model, this is the dual voice coil 10-inch model, and it works in 0.42 cubic feet. And it sounds great doing it. It'll handle 400 watts continuous. And there's a single voice coil version available as well. So once again, 2-ohm or 4-ohm or dual 4-ohm are all available. They took this category very seriously. And then there's a single 4-ohm voice coil enclosure. And you can power this off the back end of an SR amp that we'll talk about, or a Mini Power 4. And then there's a dual voice coil subwoofer that you could use off of the back end of an 8-channel Forza or the AP1D. Now, here's the powered version of that. It has 400 watts continuous. It is the one that's 0.16 ohms. Volume, the level control is in the box. So for subwoofers, we have 4 raw drivers, 2 8s, 2 10s. For enclosed subwoofers, we have 4 passives where you provide the amp and 2 active where the amplifier is built in. So putting those all together, you have, let's see, there we go. You have a lot of SKUs for subwoofers in the Audison line. Now, some people may lean more toward the powered enclosures, and some people may lean more toward the raw drivers that go in our custom enclosures. I know that's my history in the industry, but they're both legitimate business areas that solve consumer problems. And some people haven't tried these out because they don't think of Audison as a subwoofer company. So I think that that's worthy of your consideration. Now, SR amplifiers. The one thing I could think of here was that they're modern technology. And let me show you what I mean. All of them use what is called Audison D technology. Audison really didn't want to have Class D full range amplifiers till they thought the technology was right. But they're low noise and they're low distortion, which is a hallmark of the brand. They wanted to have clean power in really small packages. They built in USS, and as I mentioned before, and I cannot stress this enough, you hook it up in an OEM upgrade and nothing mutes. And you don't have to think about it. You don't have to turn it on. It's just automatic. And so is Signal Sense. They have advanced crossover filter options built into the amplifier. Audison is known as a DSP company, but not all upgrades have DSP in them. And so the filters that are in there are more advanced than any amplifier in its price range. I'll show you more about that in a minute. They make a 5-channel, they make a mono, they make a big 4-channel, and they make a small 4-channel. And that solves an awful lot of different problems. I'm actually doing a system in my car in a couple of weeks where we're retaining the 9-channel upmix system from BMW, and we're going with a 13-channel system by going active on some of the drivers, and we're using all SR amplifiers to do it. I'm really looking forward to it.
How many amps with that? 3?
3. I'm doing a 5-channel, and then I'm doing 2 4-channels, but I could also do it with 4 amps. I could do a mono and then some big 4 channels.
Mm-hmm.
The controls are all on the top, similar to the previous SR amplifiers. That was a family look for the SR class of amps. They have all 5 versions of protection. I see a lot of amps now that only have 4. Under voltage, over voltage, over current / low impedance, same thing. Over temp and DC offset are all built in to the protection circuit. And they have an optional sub knob that's attractive for the 5-channel model and the mono model. And so here's a picture. You can see it's an attractive amplifier. I think they really did a good job on the industrial design of this. They also found a way to put the fuses, which are very rarely, you don't need to access the fuses very often. So they actually put them on the end of the heatsink, which I thought was a cool thing to do. This model is 75 watts by 4 at 4 ohms, and then 550 watts to a 2 ohm sub. And that's a pretty powerful amplifier. 75 watts by 4 is pretty accepted in this price range, but the 550 watts, that's a bold statement, I think. You have bandpass crossovers on channels 3 and 4. So that means you can either use this amp in a fully active 6 and tweeter configuration for your front stage, or you can do a active wideband in the dash, woofer in the door approach, which we'll talk about more later. Or if you put it in a BMW, you can put the 8s under the seat bandpass and then do the 4 in the tweeter high passed with no DSP. It's all built into the amp. Subsonic for a vented enclosure if you need it. Bass boost at 50 if you need it. You can make it a big 3-channel mode if you need it. Then we go to the mono amp. The mono amp is kind of cool because it's 500 watts into 4 ohms. That's where the model number comes from. But into 2 ohms, it's 800 watts. And into 1 ohm, it is 1,000 watts. It's a tiny amp for 1,000 watts. It does have a high-passed pre-out. So if you use this with one of the 4-channel amps, you can make a band pass because the crossover you set for the sub affects the pre-out as well. Bass boost at 50, subsonic filter. Now, you can take that amp and power 2 of the 10s I mentioned earlier, 800 watts. That's pretty cool. You can take 4 of the 10s I mentioned earlier and do 1,000 watts. And you can take 4 of the 8s I mentioned earlier and do 1,000 watts. So I think that's pretty cool. We both remember probably the 4 10-inch subwoofer systems in the mini trucks in our youth, and this takes me back. But anyway, here's the big 4-channel. 130 by 4.
You're the second person to bring up mini trucks. Anyhow.
So this is 130 by 4 at 4 ohms, and you can bridge it into a 3-channel amp that's 130 by 2 and 450 by 1, which is a nice little starter amp for a full-range system. It's got an input switch where you can run all the channels off of 2 inputs, bass boost, bandpass capable. If you use it with an SR1.500, you can do an active three-way system with those two amps together. And here's the little 4-channel. As you can tell, it's cute. It's got 85 by 4.
85 by
It's got 2-channel mode. You can make it 250 by 2. So I was thinking about using this on my underseat BMW woofers, 250 by 2. And it's got the 2 or 4 input switch, bass boost, and bandpass capable with the SR1.500. So that's pretty cool. I think that's a line of amplifiers that if you're not in there, you should really take a look at it because it solves a lot of problems. The biggest one being, of course, that your audio system plays audio after you hook it up.
And that line is mid-priced?
Yes.
Okay.
It is. Now, Prima Forza. The Prima Forza amp for the last year and a half has been an amp. It's been an 8-channel amp, but now they've had an addition to the family. So the one we've known is an 8-channel amp with 9 channels of DSP. And it has USS built in. Not enough has been mentioned about that. You connect a Forza to any car with muting behaviors. That's a thing of the past. It's also got DEQ built in. Unlike some other DSP amps, when you hook this up to an OEM system, it'll flatten out the signal for you before you tune it. It can be in a full DA system, and it is compatible with iDataLink Maestro applications to get flat signal unprocessed from the factory radio. Now, it is 85 by 8. It can also be 85 by 4 and 260 by 2 in a staggered 6-channel mode. It can also be 85 by 6 and 260 by 1. That's not enough power for my subwoofers, but some people might like it. It can also be 260 watts by 4, which is kind of cool. Here's my favorite, and we just did a tech tip on this earlier this year. You can run it 85 by 4 and 260 by 2 in a virtual 5-channel mode. People have asked, where's the 5-channel Forza? Well, if you do it right, this is the 5-channel Forza. We'll talk about that more in a minute. 5-channel amps are big in North America. Not as big in Europe, but big in North America. You can also do 85 watts by 8 and 800 watts by 1. And you do that by using the mono amp I'll show you in a minute. So in 5-channel mode, you can set this up where 1 and 2 either do the fronts and 3 and 4 do the rears, or you can set it up where 1 and 2 do the front highs and 3 and 4 do the front mid bass or front lows, and then all 4 channels on the back end up pushing your subs. Now the key part of that is you can't use a single voice coil sub as your only bass provider in virtual 5-channel mode. I'll show you what I mean. You could use an APS 10D, which is dual voice coil. You could use an APS 10DS, which is dual voice coil in the enclosure with both voice coils brought out. You could use 2 single voice coil Audison 8s or 2 single voice coil Audison 10s. And any of those configurations would get you 85 by 4 plus 520 with DSP. So that is a useful way to do it. I've used this technique twice in the last few months on upgrades I've done in friends' cars, and it's worked great every time.
I will say that the 6-channel active, I know you said 240 is not enough for you, but I mean, if you're putting a 10, that's plenty. Like a single driver. Especially
if it's a vented enclosure and you've got a hatchback, like, you know, I remember the old CRX days where we put a vented enclosure in a hatchback and it'd blow your hair out. But yes, the other thing you can do is if you have a BMW, you can set it in 6-channel mode and drive those underseat woofers with 200 plus watts each.
Yeah.
So now the AP-F1D looks a lot like the existing Forza, except it has a lot fewer terminals because it's just a mono amp. But similar to the SR amplifier we talked about earlier, it's 500 watts into 4, 1,000 watts into 1. So if you take these 2 amps together and you got 85 watts per channel on the multi-channel and you have 800 watts into 2 ohms on the mono, we're not even pushing it to its limits here. You've got 1,660 watts of 9-channel power in 2 chassis that are the size of a hardback book. And I'm not even talking
what is the size of the 8-channel?
The 8-channel is, gosh, that's a great question. I accidentally deleted that slide getting ready for this.
It's
It
small.
is. It's smaller than my notebook.
Really?
Yes. It's
Okay.
about the same length, but it's not as wide as the notebook. You can stack two of them in the amplifier hole in a BMW E90 or F10 sedan.
Wow. Okay.
It's maybe an inch and a quarter, maybe an inch and an eighth tall, and about 9 inches by about 11 inches
With DSP built in,
with DSP built in.
with the light out to go to the mono app, low pass.
Yep. And if you want to stack them, you can put in some spacers and stack them with the same mounting screws on top of each other.
What do you mean?
The mounting holes you see here,
Yeah.
you can get long machine screws and a couple of spacers and just stack them.
Oh, one on top of the other, you mean? Oh, stacked.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, right. Gotcha. Kind of like a pro mount.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the same slide from before. You can go with 2 10s and 800 watts. You can go with 4 10s and 1,000 watts. You can go with 4 8s and 1,000 watts. Something that not a lot of people associated with Audison maybe 2 years ago, but it definitely is possible in 2021.
Now, do they have other range of subwoofers, or is that the range?
That's the Audison subwoofer right now.
Okay, gotcha.
There have been historically Thesis and Voce subwoofers. Those are not in the line right now. They will be replaced in the future, but I don't have anything to talk about today about that. I'm afraid.
Fair enough.
Unfortunately, one of the things that they did was the Forza, and it's not immediately obvious from the photographs that I have here. They are shallow subwoofers. They're like this deep, so you can fit them into anything. And I think that's one of the things that they decided was really crucial for the subwoofer business, was fitting them in the tight spots in the car.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen pictures from Europe with people taking the 10-inch sub in the sealed enclosure and putting it inside the side panel of a Range Rover.
The side panel.
It fits underneath the side panel of a Range Rover.
Okay.
So to go with these subwoofers, there are some Prima speakers that are newer, which I call the Forza companions. And one of the reasons for that is that the original Prima speakers, which still exist along with the original Prima amplifiers, were all a medium powered line. And they work together. The medium power speakers and the medium power amplifiers work together. Now, Forza has more power, 85 watts per channel. So the speakers needed to be up to that level. So this is a kit that came out about a year ago that a lot of people didn't have a chance to try over 2020. And the only thing that differentiates it from the pre-existing 6 and tweeter component set is the letter P at the end, which you can think of as meaning power. But I'll show you the 3 key areas where this speaker is different. The first one is the woofer. It has a similar frame as the 165 existing speaker, but it has a taller top plate here and a taller back plate, which means it's slightly deeper overall on the magnet side. They also used a deeper magnet. So those 3 things, together with the motor design, meant that they had a longer excursion motor. That means it can play louder. If you want to play louder at the same note, you got to move farther. So this is a higher output speaker. It also has the high roll surround. The existing one has the accordion surround that doesn't have as much excursion. And they put in a larger voice coil. You can see that this voice coil is like I think it's 1.5 inches. And that means that this speaker has 115 watts RMS power handling. By the way, one of the things that I like about Audison is that they will occasionally talk about peak power. They'll occasionally talk about 2 ohm power, but they're really good at talking about RMS and 4 ohm ratings, so you can compare apples to apples. They're not into exaggerating things. Like if lightning hits your car, this isn't going to take 115 watts. This is going to take 115 watts all the time. Now that's just the woofer. Now we go to the tweeter. A lot of electromedia tweeters are deeper and have a chamber on the back. This one specifically does not. It is a low profile chamberless design because it is designed to fit in OEM locations. And so you can't be too deep if you're going to fit in OEM locations, because you hit the bolt that holds the side rear view mirror on the side of the car. It has a larger piston than the AP1. Instead of 25 millimeters, it's 29 millimeters, which means you get more cone area, which means you get louder. And that also has an extended high frequency response. It plays higher. It has a more linear high frequency response than the AP1 did. This is kind of cool. This is an assortment of all of the different grills and mounting rings and adapters and trim plates that are available for the APK 165P kit. And I used to show this and ask people how much they would pay extra for this and then tell them it's in the box. But I didn't want to be cruel, so I'm just going to tell you it's in the box. So I've installed these tweeters in a Volkswagen Tiguan in the factory location, and these little interlocking rings here helped me out amazingly to put this tweeter in the factory location very quickly and professionally. But you can see you can backload it, you can make it look factory, you can make it look aggressive. It's a really useful bit of tooling that's been included. So it fits, it's louder, it plays higher, and it goes in faster. So those are useful things to add to the tweeter. The third thing, is the passive crossovers. The passive crossovers follow the split crossover approach that Audison has used in a number of other Prima speakers. And the point here is, if you've got a car, let's say you've got a new Honda Passport, where the tweeter is angled in the bottom of the A-pillar in a very aftermarket looking mount, but the 6 is obviously in the door. You can install these passive crossovers without having to run new wires, and you can put them next to the speaker that they need to be next to. So that speeds up installation. So the APK 165P handles more power, plays lower, plays higher, plays louder, and is quicker to install. Other than that, why would you want it? You would think that this would be a big increase in cost, and I'm pleased to tell you that Automobility is making the speaker available to you at a pretty minimal upgrade from the original 165. And it fits in almost as many cars without making a different spacer ring than you would have for the original 165. So I recommend that you use this speaker, especially with the Forza amplifier. There's also an AP2 widebander. This is an aluminum cone wideband speaker, plays flat to 20K, and uses a neodymium magnet to do what it does. Now, some people have asked me, why do you have this? Bear with me a sec. There's also an AP690 woofer. This one plays down to 40 cycles if you wanted to. And it's a 6x9 woofer without any tweeters. So why would you use these together? Well, because Toyota, Ram, and Chrysler, and GM are all making cars with this layout. And you can drop these speakers into that layout, especially if you have Bose. If you have, for example, a 2014 and newer GMC or Chevrolet pickup truck full size with Bose, these speakers will work using the factory crossover points. This is the factory system from 2014 and up. I know they changed platforms a couple of years ago. Audio system is fundamentally the same design and construction. So they've got dash active speakers, door active speakers, rear door coaxial speakers, a sub in the console, and an amp on the back wall. So we can update that by taking advantage of the fact that this green line is the dash speaker and the red line is the front door speaker. And as you may know, when you sum Bose channels together, bad things happens and you get really bad cancellations. You don't have to do it. You can put an AP2 on the dash and an AP690 on the door, and they can use the factory crossover points. That retains the Bose 2-seat phase equalization processing. You can leave the rear stock on stock power, and you can use an APF 8.9-bit amplifier, which is what I did in my buddy's truck. And then you can put a 10 somewhere. I got a vehicle-specific enclosure and put it underneath the seat. This was a great upgrade, but I wanted to know if you needed DSP to make it work. So, by the way, here's the adapter that I used in the dash for the AP2, and here's the adapter that we used in the door for the 690. You can do this with a 5-channel amp with no DSP. Because of the loading, the USS, you can actually put this in. I tested it with no DSP. You can do an upgrade with no DSP in this truck because the speakers are the integration. Half of the integration is performed by the speakers. If you want to improve it, you can go with the Forza and get EQ and be able to manage the imaging a little bit better. And then we talk about DSPs. This is what Audison is known for by a lot of people. I mentioned earlier the OEM correction with the DEQ. That's in all the bit processors. So the bit 10, you get 4 inputs plus aux and 5 outputs. automatic DEQ. It's got USS speaker loading now. Then we move up to the classic Bit 1. I personally don't use the Bit 1 anymore. It's been improved 8 million times since its introduction. It's been around for quite a while, but I use some of the newer equipment myself when I can, like the Bit Nove. It has 6 inputs and 9 outputs, which is one more than the Bit 1. 2 of those are Toslink inputs, and it's got parametric EQ, which is more flexible for those of us that like parametric tuning. Now, the Virtuoso, the big dog, it has 12 inputs and 13 outputs, which is kind of, it might seem ridiculous, but with a lot of today's multi-channel upmixed OEM systems, you can really use all of them. It's got 2 Toslink inputs available. It does automatic DEQ, and it also does dephase, and it also does detime, and it uses the highest grade parts, both analog and digital. It uses a Shark floating point DSP that Audison is insanely proud of. Most car audio DSPs do not use a DSP that is that powerful. Because it's that powerful, it can run FIR mode. You may remember that I mentioned FIR mode at the beginning. This is kind of like one of those Marvel movies where they put the Easter eggs in. And I can't talk too much about the new features that are coming with FIR mode, but I'm gonna go to my Marvel analogy here, Ben. You know how Ant-Man travels in time in Avengers Endgame?
Of course.
Well, the way he does it is apparently you have to go to the quantum realm, and when you return, you have to set your equipment to what time you're going to return to the time stream in, right?
That's how that works.
Well, if you think about that, you'll understand what Audison's going to announce with FIR mode very soon.
We're going to be able to put this in our car and travel to the quantum realm. We can go to the quantum realm with what's coming down.
There's probably some copyright issues with quantum realm, but I'll propose it. But you'll get to decide what time it is.
You'll get to decide.
That'll make what time more sense later. I promise.
Okay. We got about 2 minutes left to go, Ken.
So we got Virtuoso, Nove, Prima, and Forza, and then the Bit 10 entry level. The one thing I will say is that this is a list. If you're an existing dealer and you look at this list and any of this stuff is stuff you've never heard of, talk to your Automobility rep, because these are all vital solutions for problems that you should know about, that you want to have on hand when you need them, especially that USS4 Universal Speaker Simulator, because it'll work with anybody's product when you get in trouble with a muting factory radio. And other than that,
oh wow, look at that!
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing. I really want to circle back real quick in a minute or two that I have left. I think watching this and really absorbing your presentation, I think the go-to for me was the lineup of subwoofers. Every scenario possible with the enclosures, both active or passive configuration, and really small sizes. Like if I could go back, I would have asked you to bring some on with you so you can actually show like the 8-inch, especially how small that was. It was a 0.3 of a cubic foot. Right?
That's a good point.
That's number one. Number two, winner for me, chicken dinner, the AP Prima DSP built-in sub amplifiers. Very impressive. The size. And if you're telling me, I don't have the pricing in front of me, but if they're mid-range, I'm not expecting over-the-top pricing on this. And
they're very competitive with existing DSP multi-channel amplifiers, right, and they have the DEQ that none of the others have.
Right. They look slick. They're small package. And I like the fact that they can stack. And I think the power is actually really generous on what those are. Whether you're using, that 8-channel by itself or adding a monoblock, to power the subs, I think that's a go-to. That's my takeaway from this one. That one's got me hot and bothered. I
like where your head's at, Ben.
And other than that, I think it opens up the world to look at the loudspeakers as well. You know what I mean? Yeah, you got Prima. But if you go to the website for Audison, Prima is all about OEM integration. I think there's a huge push from Audison towards OEM integration and trying to come up with as many solutions as possible for trouble vehicles. I know that you talked about your buddy's truck with the 6x9 components up front run active. My question to you is, how's the bass? Because I could only imagine 6x9s in a door, crossed over properly with proper power. Probably a lot of mid bass right there.
Well, that also has a 10 in the back, and it does excellently. I didn't mention my sister and brother-in-law's Toyota FJ. They were putting together a camping rig with a rooftop tent and the whole deal. They didn't have room for a sub. So I did the AP2 and the AP690 in the factory locations because it's a Tacoma basically underneath, right? Mm-hmm. And no sub at all. Just damped down the doors, noise treated the doors, and they told me they didn't need a sub.
Yeah, a 6x9 is a big woofer surface if you're taking out the highs from that, right?
A 6x9 is essentially an 8, and it was using the door as an enclosure, so it loved it.
Beautiful. That's it. That's all that we have the time for, Ken.
Well, thanks for having me, Ben. I really appreciate it. And talk to your Automobility rep and learn more about how to get on board.
So both Hertz, Audison, call Automobility. Call Ken. He loves your question. No, I'm just kidding. Get a hold of Automobility. Ken, we can't thank you enough for coming on board with us for this training and appreciate your time here during Industry Week. And yes, we are definitely circling back for some of that quantum realm time travel stuff that you mentioned.
Can't wait.
All right. Talk to you soon. And there it is, Ken Ward, a trainer for both Audison and, of course, Hertz as well. But a great session on Audison. If you're interested in Audison products, make sure you contact Automobility. That's it. More live coverage coming to you from day 7 here at CMA Industry Week. Lots more Automobility to go. I'm your host, Ben Wu. Until next time, we connect.